I stood on Eilean Donan's bridge at dawn, watching the mist curl off Loch Duich. The water was so still, it looked painted. Yet beneath that calm lies a battlefield. In 1719, during the Jacobite Rising, 3 Royal Navy warships unleashed their fury. Within days, centuries of stone were reduced to rubble, arches broken, towers shattered, a fortress erased in fire and smoke. And yet, this castle refused to die. Its silhouette still rises against the Highland sky. Tourists capture it, filmmakers immortalize it, and legends whisper of a ghostly garrison still marching through its halls. If you believe places like this deserve to be remembered, not just as ruins, but as living stories, subscribe now. Because to understand how Eilean Donan became Scotland's greatest icon, we must return to where it all began. Eilean Donan's earliest strength lay not in stone, but in its location. Where Loch Duich, Loch Long, and Loch Alsh converge, the island stands like a gatehouse to the Highlands. 13th century builders recognized what Viking raiders had long exploited. Whoever held this tidal rock controlled the seaways. At high tide, the loch wrapped it in a natural moat. But the same waters that protected it could also trap its defenders, stranding them as the tide surged back in. Geography shaped every wall. Isolation was both its shield and its risk. The first defences were simple timber palisades, quickly replaced by stones strong enough to withstand raids. A central keep rose within the curtain wall. By the 16th century, firearms had transformed its design. Arrow slits became gun loops, walls thickened, and angles of fire tightened the approaches. What began as a refuge had become a fortress braced for the gunpowder age. The clans gave those walls their living defence. The MacRaes, hereditary constables to the Mackenzies, turned the island into both stronghold and home. Known as the Mackenzies' shirt of mail, they fought with short blades and spiked targes, deadly in the castle's narrow stairwells. More than warriors, they were guardians rooted in the landscape, masters of every channel and tide. By the 1500s, Eilean Donan was among the most formidable posts in the west. Relics hint at its reach. Spanish coins unearthed in its ruins, pottery from France, the echo of wine once poured in its great hall. But wealth could not hide its weaknesses. The island yielded little food in a siege, and walls built for arrows would prove fragile against broadsides from ships. For centuries, the defences held, but the balance was fragile. A new century would bring warships to its waters, armed with a weapon its founders could never have imagined. At dawn, on May 10th, 1719, cannon fire shattered the calm of Loch Duich. The first broadside roared from HMS Worcester, joined by Flamborough and Enterprise. Inside Eilean Donan, 40 Spanish soldiers and a few Highland allies abandoned breakfast to man the walls. Their outdated cannon barely reached the attackers. The Navy's plan was ruthless and simple. The frigates anchored beyond range, firing in rotation so the barrage never ceased. Shot after shot tore into the sea-facing walls. By nightfall, masonry was collapsing into the loch. Inside, defenders piled musket balls by doorways for frantic volleys, barricaded the courtyard with overturned tables, and set powder kegs for a last stand. On the third day, the northwest tower gave way, burying the armoury beneath rubble. With defences crippled and no route of escape, the garrison surrendered. Their endurance impressed observers, but no medieval fortress could outlast modern naval fire. The Navy's orders were not to capture, but to erase. Marines dragged 27 barrels of gunpowder into the vaults. The explosion ripped centuries of stone into the air. Blocks the size of carts splashed into the loch. The eastern curtain wall fell in a single slab and shattered on the shore. When the smoke lifted, the stronghold was gone. The wreckage told its own story. Silver fused into blackened lumps, a bronze bell twisted into molten arcs, a staircase choked in rubble. Only one fragment survived intact, a scorched tapestry, fluttering like a ragged flag. The Navy logged the demolition with a single word: satisfactory. For nearly 2 centuries, nothing stood here but hollow arches and broken walls, a blackened silhouette on the water. Yet even in silence, Eilean Donan refused to vanish. It waited, scarred, restless, and remembered, for the day someone would bring it back. For generations, Eilean Donan was little more than a shattered husk. Its walls gaped to the sky, towers reduced to stumps, arches framing only emptiness. Winter frost split stones once strong enough to defy cannon fire, while villagers carted rubble to build cottages. Where a fortress had commanded the tides, only a blackened skeleton remained. Yet ruin has its own gravity. Painters and poets lingered on its silhouette, drawn to what still endured. In 1831, J.M.W. Turner painted the castle beneath storm-dark skies, its jagged outline stubborn against the weather. Wordsworth called it a mirror of the Highland spirit. Visitors rowed out or crossed at low tide, hoping to glimpse the ghost of a fortress lost. By the 19th century, sketches and photographs circulated widely, transforming the ruin into a national symbol. Not of defeat, but of heritage exposed to time. The MacRaes, though dispossessed, carried that memory like an heirloom. They guarded relics of the fall, a bronze cauldron, scraps of the scorched fire tapestry. Clan members would gather on the silent island, tethering their identity to broken stones. Locals whispered of lights flickering in empty windows, as though the castle itself refused to surrender. Still, decay marched on. Engineers declared the foundations unsound. Birds nested where turrets had stood. Storms toppled the last chimneys. By the late 1800s, the ruin seemed beyond saving, destined to survive only in verse and watercolour. And yet, demand for its image only grew. Romantic prints and souvenirs kept Eilean Donan alive in the imagination of strangers. Scotland itself was awakening to the idea of recovering its medieval landmarks. It was in this moment, when Eilean Donan seemed reduced to little more than memory, that the improbable began to stir. In 1911, Lieutenant Colonel John MacRae-Gilstrap stepped forward. A decorated officer with the discipline of a surveyor, he saw not rubble, but heritage waiting to be reborn, and dared to attempt what others called madness, to raise Eilean Donan from ruin and make it live again. Progress halted during the war, but from 1919 to 1932, he oversaw one of the most ambitious restorations in Scotland. Engineers doubted the task until a 16th century painting surfaced, offering a blueprint that fused archaeology with vision. Guided by its outline, stonemasons dredged sunken blocks from the loch and quarried sandstone from the original source. Each stone was catalogued, tested, and reset, sometimes more than once when records clashed. Where gunpowder had shattered foundations, discrete pours of concrete stabilized the bedrock. Authenticity was the goal, but modern engineering made survival possible. The bridge was the boldest compromise. The medieval stronghold had used a wooden causeway, but MacRae-Gilstrap chose a sweeping stone arch, partly for drama, partly for access. Beneath its timeless face, hidden steel supports carried the load. Crews cut and fixed blocks at low tide, racing against the incoming water to anchor each arch before the sea reclaimed the ground. Inside the keep, his discipline showed in every detail. Oak beams were hand-hewn and oiled, hinges forged by smiths, cannon scars carefully recreated where records placed them. When sketches conflicted, he scoured siege accounts to decide how a window should open or a stair should turn. Critics mocked his inclusion of plumbing, but he countered that medieval castles had always managed waste. Why should this one be less authentic for being livable? By 1932, the castle stood whole again. Muskets lined walls where they had once fired. The scorched fire tapestry was hung in the great hall, and a fortress erased by war rose anew against the Highland sky. But stone alone was not all that returned. From the moment the walls closed once more, the whispers began. Footsteps in empty corridors, flickers of light in sealed chambers. The builders had revived more than a ruin. They had awakened its ghosts. Ghosts became part of Eilean Donan's identity almost as soon as the restoration was complete. Night staff spoke of footsteps on empty stairwells and the ring of metal in the locked armory. Visitors described the scent of pipe smoke lingering in rooms where no fire had burned. By day, it was a castle. By night, it was a story. Local tradition names one spirit a headless Spanish soldier, echo of those killed in 1719. Curators have found muskets mysteriously repositioned overnight, always aimed back toward the loch, as if the garrison still stands watch. Upstairs, reports centre on a lady in green gliding through chambers. Some say she was a Mackenzie bride who died here in the 1500s. Others claim the green symbolises Jacobite loyalty. A few even insist she has spoken Gaelic warnings in the halls. The loch, too, carries its own legends. Fishermen whisper of the Otter King, a shapeshifter circling the island at dusk. In 1982, a diver inspecting the bridge foundations surfaced abruptly, shaken, refusing to explain what he had seen. Modern investigators add yet another layer. Thermal cameras register cold patches at the very spots shattered by cannon fire. Audio devices capture faint murmurs, which some claim echo in Old Spanish dialects. Science offers no proof, but the alignments are unsettling. Rather than erase such echoes, the rebuild preserved them. The fire tapestry scarred in the blast hangs in the Great Hall, and scorch marks were left visible, reminders of fire and memory. A ghost log now records visitor encounters, binding legend to architecture. Eilean Donan is more than stone reborn. It is a stage where history and haunting overlap. That duality gave it a power no blueprint could replicate, and when cameras finally arrived, the world saw not just a castle, but a legend already alive. High above Loch Duich, Eilean Donan made the leap from heritage site to screen icon. Its cinematic career began with Highlander, 1986, where the castle became Clan MacLeod's ancestral seat. Crews prized its medieval silhouette, but struggled to disguise 20th century repairs. A false roof was built along the seaward side, while the Great Hall doubled as a training ground where actors swung genuine 16th century weapons. Cold drafts near the armory unsettled crew members, recalling ghost stories long tied to the site. Bond followed. In The World Is Not Enough, 1999, Eilean Donan became an MI6 bunker, demanding feats of logistics. Equipment had to cross the tidal flats during brief windows when the causeway was dry and be dismantled before the sea reclaimed it. Electricians described sleepless nights hauling cables in rising water, a reminder that the same tides that once protected the fortress still dictate its use. Filming here has never been easy. Shoots run in 6-hour blocks controlled by the tide, and aerial shots require Coast Guard approval. Drones vanish in erratic winds, and interiors shift with unpredictable drafts. Yet those very obstacles lend the castle its timeless realism. When Elizabeth, the Golden Age, 2007, used natural candlelight instead of studio rigs, the stone itself provided effects no filter could match. Legends persist alongside the cameras. Extras whisper about blurred figures in set photos. Some directors note strange acoustics in the same rooms again and again. Whether tricks of light or echoes of memory, such stories only reinforce the castle's aura. Today, filmmakers return for what no studio can build. Stone steeped in history, scenery framed by nature, and a fortress that embodies resilience. What was once ruin now projects itself across the world stage, and its story still isn't finished. Eilean Donan's story is one of destruction and defiance. Once shattered by cannon fire, it rose again from ruin to become Scotland's most iconic castle, a place where stone, memory, and legend fuse into something larger than history. Visitors don't just walk through a restoration. They step into a battlefield reborn, where ghosts of the past still share the halls with those who rebuild and remember. Its survival proves a truth worth carrying. Even when walls fall, a place's spirit can outlast fire and centuries. And when vision meets craftsmanship, that spirit can be called back into life. If you believe history deserves to be remembered and reborn, join us. Subscribe now and help keep stories like this standing.